Hi, I'm the son they erased, not forgotten, erased. My parents told my brother I was worthless. While they drained my accounts, stole my name, and rewrote our family's legacy without me, I sent them money for 5 years. They funneled it into his business. They used my signature to secure loans I never agreed to. And when I found out, my mother looked me dead in the eye and smiled, like this betrayal was always part of the plan. But what they didn't see coming was the son they tried to break, learned how to fight back. What would you do if the people who raised you were also the ones who robbed you blind? Let me show you what happened next. The smell hit me the moment I stepped inside. Roasted turkey, sage, cinnamon rolls straight out of the oven. The kind of scent that's supposed to mean home, comfort, family. But as I walked down the hallway, it felt more like a mask. A layer of fake warmth stretched thin over a house colder than I remembered. It was Thanksgiving, and everything was just as my mother liked it. Perfect. The table had been set since noon. Silverware lined up like soldiers. Crystal glasses that only came out for show. I passed the living room, catching glimpses of extended family chatting over football, their laughter drifting up like nothing had ever gone wrong in this house. I kept walking. The hallway carpet muted my steps. Familiar creaks in the wood underfoot reminded me where I was, a place I used to call home. And then, near the study, I slowed. The door was cracked open just enough. I don't know why I stopped. Something in me knew not to keep walking. Inside, I heard my father's voice. Flat, clear, final. He's worth nothing. His life is trash. Silence. Then I realized. He wasn't talking about some random business deal. He was talking about me. I didn't move. I barely breathed. My brother Matthew sat across from him. I could picture it without seeing, that slight slump in his shoulders, the way he always nodded along to keep peace. He didn't say a word. And my mother. She was there too. I saw her just beyond the gap in the door, perched on the arm of the leather chair, eyes calm, not surprised, not angry, just indifferent. She turned her head, and our eyes met, and then she smiled. Not the kind of smile you give when you're caught off guard. Not the kind of smile that apologizes for the terrible thing you just overheard. No, hers was small, tight-lipped, knowing, as if to say, this has always been the plan. You just didn't get the memo. That smile hit harder than anything my father had just said. I stepped back. Quiet, careful, like the child I used to be, always watching, never speaking. I turned down the hallway and made my way to the guest room at the back of the house. The door clicked softly behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the Paisley comforter. My hands trembled, not from anger yet, but from something deeper. That kind of disbelief when you realize the thing you feared most has been true all along. Downstairs, the clinking of wine glasses and muffled laughter pushed up through the vents. They were still celebrating. I leaned back against the headboard, closed my eyes, and memories started pouring in. All the times my father missed my school plays. How he only came to one of my graduation ceremonies and left before the reception. How my mother would light up when Matthew walked into a room but barely glanced up when I arrived. Matthew got the new car at 16. I got the hand-me-down Civic that stalled in winter. He got applause. I got silence. But I never let myself believe it was personal. I always made excuses for them. Maybe they just thought I was stronger. Maybe I was just more independent. But no. Tonight proved it wasn't an accident. This was planned. Cold. Deliberate. I looked at my duffel bag in the corner. I'd brought gifts, expensive wine, a new wool coat for Dad. I'd spent weeks thinking about what would make them smile. I sent money when Matthew needed help with the business. I bailed them out quietly when the IRS came knocking 2 years ago. And they still called me nothing. I stood up and walked to the window. The streetlights outside cast long shadows across the snow-dusted lawn. I watched my breath fog the glass, listened to the quiet hum of betrayal in my ears. It wasn't just the words. It was the ease with which they were said. The comfort they had in deciding I didn't matter, while using everything I'd ever given them to build their perfect little life. I reached for my phone and stared at the screen. No texts, no missed calls. Just a silent reminder of how often I made the effort and how rarely it was returned. I could have walked out, left and never looked back. But something in me clicked. They wanted to erase me. Fine, but I wasn't going to make it easy. I wasn't going to play the quiet one anymore. The loyal son in the shadows, the forgotten sibling who still showed up with a smile. That version of me died tonight. I opened my notes app and started typing. Not a message, a list. Names, dates, accounts, transfers, conversations I remembered with detail they thought I'd forgotten. Let them keep smiling over dinner, because I had just started keeping records. I didn't sleep that night. After the door closed and the house settled into its practiced Thanksgiving hush, I lay on the guest bed staring at the ceiling, the glow of the hallway light slipping beneath the door like an accusation. I could hear the faint murmur of my parents' voices downstairs, laughing about something, probably the pie. I waited until the house fell completely silent. Then I sat up, swung my legs over the edge of the bed, and grabbed my laptop from my duffel bag. I didn't plan to work. I just needed something to occupy my hands, something to keep my thoughts from spiraling into old habits, justifying their cruelty, softening their words. I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. Family support docs. It started as a simple backup, wire receipts, emails, scanned checks, but over time, it had become a quiet archive of my contributions. I'd always been meticulous with finances. Grandma Helen made sure of that. I scrolled through the subfolders, 2017, 2018, 2019. Each one was full of PDFs. Each PDF was a wire transfer, $500. Every month, 5 years straight. The pattern stared back at me with clinical precision. At first, I remembered it as a generous gesture. My father had called one winter evening, said the construction business hit a slowdown, needed a little help with payroll. Temporary, he promised. 2 or 3 months max. I didn't hesitate. But as I kept clicking through files, reality took a sharper shape. The slowdown had ended by late 2018. Permits picked up again. Their crew was back to full strength. I knew this because I helped them restructure the damn loan portfolio. Yet the transfers continued, unprompted. Not once did he say, "We're good now." Not once did they suggest I stop. $92,000. That's what I'd given them, quietly, without strings, thinking it was support for a family business. But it wasn't. It was something else. My stomach tightened as I opened another folder. Grandpa H. Trust. I had access to those documents from when I helped Helen manage his estate during his final years. She was always clear. Her son, my father, and I were to split the estate 50-50. She even had the attorney write it in a letter, to ensure fairness and to recognize his help in my final years. The final disbursement was $7 million. I should have seen half. I opened the ledger file from the trust account. My eyes scanned the distribution line, $70 transferred in one lump to an LLC account titled Valenstone Ventures, Matthews Company. Not a dime to me, no explanation, no correction, just gone. I stared at the screen, unable to move. I wasn't angry at the money, not at first. I was angry at how easy they made the decision, how natural it must have felt for them to cut me out, as if I was never a factor to begin with. I stood and walked to the window, trying to breathe through the heat rising in my chest. And the lawn was empty. Snowflakes drifted under the streetlight. My mother's smile flashed in my head again, and this time, I didn't feel numb. I felt fire. I turned back to the desk, opened a new document, and titled it, Personal Ledger, Family Disbursements. I began typing line by line. $500 month, support payments, March 2017 to March 2022 IRS lien, covered penalty, June 2020, loan cosign for Matthew, defaulted, 2019. Time, 43, unpaid hours helping rebuild Valenstone's site back end. I wasn't doing this to sue them, not yet. I just needed to see it all in one place. Needed to confirm that I wasn't crazy, that the math matched the feeling in my gut, that I hadn't imagined being used. And suddenly I could hear Helen's voice, her soft rasp, and the way she'd tap her finger against the kitchen table when she wanted to make a point. Financial independence is freedom, she told me when I was 12, teaching me to calculate interest on her savings bonds. If you don't track your value, no one else will. She was the only one who ever saw me as an investment, not a resource. I remembered her hands, thin, veiny, always warm. I remembered how she made me file her tax returns with her, even when I was barely a teenager. She said, One day, they'll pretend you never mattered. You need proof you did. It used to feel paranoid. Now it felt prophetic. I opened a spreadsheet and began building a new tab. Emotional debits. Not money, just memories. Forgotten birthdays. Missed graduations. Things said in passing that sliced me open but left no scar anyone could see. I wrote, March 2003. You always make everything harder than it needs to be. May 2010. Didn't invite me to Dad's award ceremony. Said it was just a work thing. November 2016. Thanksgiving. Matthew's wife given the family ring. Mom said I'd understand. These things weren't proof in a courtroom, but they were real. They were mine. And I needed to remember them. Because for so long, I'd excused them. I'd told myself, they don't mean it. I thought love meant patience, but now I saw it for what it was, erasure. That night, sitting in that perfectly decorated house, I realized I wasn't just cut out financially. I'd been erased on every level. And they expected me to smile through it, play the part, carve the turkey, toast a family. But the betrayal wasn't just in the numbers. It was hidden in plain sight at the very table where we all pretended to be a family. I closed the laptop just as the sound of clinking silverware filtered up through the floorboards. The dinner bell of family expectations. I washed my face, buttoned my shirt, and looked in the mirror. Not to fix anything, just to make sure I could still recognize the man they were trying so hard to pretend didn't exist. The hallway was quiet as I walked back toward the dining room. I could already hear my brother's voice, warm, assertive, rehearsed, like he was already pitching something, typical. The table was lit up like a magazine spread. Candles flickered against polished silver. Steam floated from ceramic dishes carefully staggered down the center. My mother had arranged everything down to the garnishes on the mashed potatoes. Parsley leaves, cranberries. Presentation, always presentation. I took the last open seat, of course, at the far end of the table, just close enough to be part of the photo, but not the memory. It was the same seat I always seemed to end up in, like the furniture knew better than to pretend I was part of the core. My mother nodded at me briefly, her expression unreadable. "Before the food gets cold," she said sweetly, motioning to the turkey. My father passed the carving knife to Matthew without hesitation. No one asked how my flight was. No one mentioned how long it had been since I'd been home. That silence I had grown used to. Halfway through dinner, between the stuffing and the green beans, I cleared my throat. "I actually have something to share," I said, setting down my glass. My voice was calm, deliberate. But before I could say more, Matthew jumped in, like he knew the pause was his opening. "So, I've been meeting with 2 VCs, he said, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. "They're very interested in the health tech angle I've been building on." Father perked up instantly, his fork clinking against the edge of his plate. "You finally got their attention?" Matthew nodded, launching into a detailed breakdown of his latest startup, something about biometric wearables, predictive diagnostics, potential to license out the algorithm. It sounded exactly like the last 3 pitches I'd heard from him, all recycled jargon and polished hope. My father leaned forward like it was the first time he'd heard a good idea in months. My mother rested her chin in her palm, beaming like the boy had just won a Nobel. I waited for the right moment, when he paused to sip his wine. "I've accepted a position," I said quietly. "Senior partner, Boston." It hung there for half a second. Then my mother smiled. Not surprised, not proud. Just that same shallow, tight smile I'd seen in the hallway. A knowing smirk that seemed to say, "That's cute, but let's move on." And they did. Matthew went right back into his pitch. Father asked about exit strategies. My mother passed the rolls and said, "It's just so exciting when someone finds their passion." Not to me, to him. They didn't even ask which firm, or when I was moving. No toast, no nod, just skipped. I could have said I joined NASA or married the Queen and the reaction would have been the same. I sat back, letting their voices dull into a low hum. I stared at my untouched plate. The sweet potatoes had gone cold. The humiliation wasn't sharp, it was slow. A quiet unraveling of the last bit of hope I had for their recognition. It was the kind of moment that doesn't scream. It whispers endlessly until it's louder than any shout could be. I thought about Helen. She would have clapped, would have made me repeat the job title just to brag about it later. She would have baked a pie just for that news. But here, at this table, I didn't exist. Not really. I was a place setting, a footnote. I started counting every time someone interrupted me, every question asked of Matthew, but not me. I kept a mental ledger, not for revenge, not yet, just so I could stop gaslighting myself into believing I was imagining it. They weren't cruel, they were efficient. They knew how to erase someone without making a sound. And I decided right then I wouldn't interrupt their joy. I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't demand a seat they clearly didn't want to give. No, I would let it pile up. Because when truth finally hits the table, they won't be able to ignore the weight of what they've buried. When the plates were cleared and the laughter faded, the house revealed another truth I wasn't supposed to hear. The house had gone quiet. Dishes stacked, lights dimmed. The fake laughter they'd polished up for Thanksgiving had faded like the scent of cinnamon candles now flickering their last. I told myself I'd head back to the guest room, maybe try to sleep, but my feet didn't quite agree. I wandered through the hallway again, trying not to look too deliberate. The carpet softened my steps. As I neared the study, that familiar low hum of voices carried through the cracked door, the one they never seemed to close all the way. The business, the house, the trust, all of it will go to your brother. It's already structured. The paperwork was finalized back in March. My father's voice was level, almost bored, like he was reading off a grocery list. There wasn't a trace of conflict in his tone. No hesitation. Matthew sat opposite him, not saying a word. I could see his face partially through the opening, eyes fixed on his drink, not meeting Dad's gaze. He wasn't proud. But he wasn't protesting either. That silence told me everything. Then, as if some cruel clockwork was in play, my mother stepped into view, standing near the study window, her head turned slightly, and our eyes met. She had that same quiet smile again. No alarm, no guilt, just confirmation, as if this was always the plan. I backed away slowly before they could say anything else. My pulse wasn't racing. Not like earlier. It was something deeper now. Something still, but burning underneath. I moved quickly down the hall and closed the door to the guest room behind me, more out of instinct than need. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands gripping the mattress. Then I reached for my laptop again. This time I wasn't scanning bank statements for peace of mind. I was looking for evidence. A folder labeled Holiday Docs sat buried in my drive. I'd saved it years ago, back when Dad asked me to review a few standard insurance forms over Christmas. I remembered signing them at the kitchen counter. He said it was just to keep things in order. When I opened the PDFs now, I saw it clearly. Page 3 of one document had my signature next to a loan clause. Another listed my name under guarantor. Construction loan. Dated 2 years ago. I wasn't just forgotten in this family. I was used. I opened the banking archive next. Wire transfers. My account listed on the guarantee. $300,000 issued 18 months ago, from a credit line under my name. I never saw a dime of it, never even got a call. The balance had been quietly rolled into a consolidation they'd paid off using inheritance funds. I was collateral. While they hosted dinners and poured wine and smiled through carefully curated family moments, I was underwriting their survival. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. I didn't feel tears, I didn't yell. I just started typing, a new spreadsheet. Row by row, I began logging everything. The forged signatures, the misused funds, the clauses slipped in while I was distracted by a plate of turkey, and then another column, emotions, the ignored texts, the celebrations I wasn't invited to, the job promotions never mentioned, the side conversations that always ended when I walked into the room. The guest room light cast a dull yellow glow. I didn't turn it off. My fingers moved without pause. They wrote me out like I was never theirs. But now, I was writing myself back in. Not as a son. They'd made it clear there was no place for that role at this table, but as something else entirely. By morning, I knew I couldn't leave this house without confronting them. Not as their son, but as the creditor they never expected, and I didn't sleep. I didn't even lie down. The hours between night and dawn blurred together, a haze of scrolling, sorting, cross-checking, and quiet resolve. Outside, the sky began to shift from ink to deep blue. Stillness wrapped around the house like a second skin. I stood, stretched my neck, and walked to the kitchen. The floor was cold beneath my feet, and the silence, a different kind now, felt earned. I opened the cabinet, took out 4 mugs, poured the coffee slowly, one for each of them, a kind of peace offering. No, a summons. This was not a conversation. It was a reckoning. Back in the dining room, I arranged the mugs deliberately. In front of each one, I placed a folder, neatly labeled. Inside, records, proof, the full anatomy of their betrayal. I didn't rush it. Every movement had meaning. The table, perfectly set just hours ago for a performance of family, now bore the weight of truth. My father was the first to arrive. I heard his shuffle before I saw him, the worn leather soles of his slippers dragging across the tile. He paused at the threshold. He looked from the mugs to the folders, then at me. "You're up early," he muttered, his voice low. I pulled out the chair opposite me and gestured to it. "Sit down. We need to talk." He didn't move right away, but his eyes never left mine. Then, slowly, he settled into the chair. My mother entered next, wrapped in her morning robe, makeup already touched up, like always. Her presence was never accidental. She moved like a person who never expected to be questioned. "What's this?" she asked, her eyes narrowing as they landed on the folders. "Coffee," I said. "And the truth." She didn't like that. Her jaw tightened. Still, she sat down. Matthew came last, his hair a mess, shirt wrinkled, sleep still in his eyes. But even in that disheveled state, he hesitated when he saw the table. He looked at me, then our parents, then quietly slipped into the last empty seat. I leaned forward and slid each folder toward them. "Inside," I said, calm and even, "you'll find 7 years of monthly wire transfers, $92,000 total. From me, supposedly temporary help for a business downturn that ended long ago." I paused, letting that land before continuing. Then, "Grandpa's inheritance, $7 million, redirected without notice, into accounts connected to Matthew, structured under shell entities but traceable." My father stiffened, nostrils flaring. He glanced down at the papers, then back up. "Business is complicated," he said, defensive but not surprised. "Forgery isn't," I replied flatly. A quiet breath passed between us. My voice didn't waver. I wasn't performing anger. I was embodying clarity, the kind that only comes when your illusions are finally broken. Mother reached for her coffee, her fingers trembling slightly. She didn't meet my eyes. "Darling, you're overreacting," she said softly, her voice painted with false concern. "Think of everything we've done for you." "For me," I repeated. "Really? My education. I paid through scholarships and 2 jobs, my first apartment, rented on a credit score I built from nothing. The job offers, the career path, every move I've made, I earned without a dime from this table." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "What you've done," I continued, "is siphon my income, leverage my name, and sign me on as collateral, while telling me, over and over, that I didn't matter." Matthew was silent. He flipped through his folders slowly, eyes scanning the documents, lips parted, as if on the verge of saying something. But nothing came. I stood deliberately, my chair scraping the floor just enough to draw attention. "No more," I said clearly. "No more transfers, no more documents, no more guarantees. I will not underwrite this family while being erased from it." The room felt smaller in that moment, as if the walls had moved in, closing around the weight of my words. My father looked down. My mother held her mug tighter. Matthew still said nothing. The silence that followed stretched out, taut, uneasy. I mistook it for victory, but later, I'd learn. It was only the beginning of their retaliation. I should have known better. The silence at the table wasn't surrender, it was strategy. The kind that unfolds not in shouts but in whispers behind closed doors. And they didn't wait long to begin. By midday, the house had changed. Not physically. The same polished wood floors, the same family photos smiling from the mantel, the same smell of cinnamon and leftover turkey lingering in the air. But the energy, it was different, thicker, heavier, like the house had exhaled something poisonous and was now holding its breath. I caught snippets as I moved from room to room. My father's voice behind the closed door of his study, low and clipped. We'll frame it around concern, not confrontation. If he pushes, we spin it. Footsteps down the hallway. My mother, phone pressed to her ear in the laundry room, softening her tone as I passed. You know how sensitive he's always been. All that pressure in Chicago. I think it's starting to show. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. By the time my cousins arrived for leftovers, plastic containers in hand and polite smiles on their faces, the air was thick with curated concern, the kind of fake warmth that seeps under your skin. I caught the look in Aunt Linda's eyes, a flicker of sympathy quickly masked by restraint. Uncle Joe's half-hug came with an awkward pat on the back and a glance toward my mother, as if checking for approval. They'd already begun laying the groundwork. He's ungrateful. He's unraveling. He's always been difficult. And just like that, I went from whistleblower to family liability. I didn't confront them. Not then. What would have been the point? They weren't listening. They were performing. Every word, every look was theater. And in this house, my lines had already been written for me. Around 4 p.m., I stepped out into the garage for air. The cold cement under my bare feet grounded me. It was quiet, just the hum of the old freezer and the creak of the wooden beams overhead. I leaned against the tool bench, rubbing my temples, when I heard the door behind me creak open. Matthew. He stepped in, holding 2 bottles of root beer. Offered me one without a word. We stood there for a moment, sipping like kids, avoiding chores. Then he spoke. Look, he started, his voice cautious. I didn't know about the inheritance. Dad handled all of that. I thought Grandpa left it in one lump to the business. I looked at him, waiting. I never saw any of the documents, he added, almost like a plea. But you didn't ask either, I replied, voice even. He winced. I guess I didn't want to know. We stood in silence again. For a second, I almost believed him, that maybe he was just as much a pawn. But then he shifted, the way he always does when he's rehearsed something. I'm just saying, he continued, maybe it's not worth blowing this all up. Maybe it hurts you more than them going public. Think about your firm, your clients, your name. There it was. Not his words, theirs, delivered through his lips, sugar-coated in brotherly concern, a veiled threat, wrapped in family. You sound just like Dad, I said quietly. He didn't deny it. I didn't finish the root beer. Back in the guest room, I sank onto the bed, more tired than angry. The weight of it all pressed down, not just the betrayal, but the rewriting of truth. They weren't just stealing money, they were stealing the narrative, painting me as unstable, difficult, disloyal. I opened my laptop to close my files, half ready to pack up and leave. Maybe this was a war I didn't have the strength to fight. Maybe walking away meant peace. Maybe disappearing was easier than being dissected by the very people who once called me family. But as I scrolled one last time, my eyes caught something I hadn't noticed before. A line item buried in an old tax folder. Dated 6 years ago, an $8,000 transfer from Grandma Helen's trust, labeled Venture Investment. I clicked deeper. The account led straight to Matthew, the same year he launched that doomed app, the same quarter Grandma passed away. My stomach turned. That money wasn't public. She'd left it to me, privately, quietly, because she knew, she always knew, and they took it anyway, without a word, without remorse. That was the crack that shattered my exhaustion. This wasn't about bitterness anymore. It wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about honoring the one person who ever saw me, not for what I could give or sacrifice or support, but for who I was. If they thought I was finished, they had forgotten who taught me how to fight with numbers. I sat at the edge of the bed, the faint morning light beginning to seep through the curtains, casting long gray shadows on the floor. My laptop was still warm on my lap, fan quietly humming. Sleep hadn't come, and I hadn't wanted it to. Not yet. Instead, I spent the night doing what I did best. Organizing facts, removing emotion, building a case. By the time the sun hinted at its arrival, I had it all. A concise, time-stamped, cross-referenced file. Wire transfers, inheritance siphons, forged documents. Each page a quiet scream of betrayal now laid out in clean font and PDF clarity. I saved 3 copies, one encrypted, sent to my firm's legal counsel marked hold unless instructed, one uploaded to my personal secure cloud, one burned to a USB drive in my bag. I felt calm, not in the way hope feels, soft and vulnerable. This was a colder calm, made of preparation and precision. I wasn't here to plead. I wasn't here for forgiveness. I was here to deliver the truth, stripped of apologies. Around 7 a.m., I stepped into the kitchen and brewed a full pot of coffee. The house was silent but not resting, just waiting. I set 4 mugs out on the dining room table, spaced neatly apart. Beside each mug, a folder, slim, black, identical. The contents were not. I poured coffee into each cup. No sugar, no cream. I wanted no distractions. Then I waited. First came my father. He entered from the hallway, tie already knotted as if he'd dressed in anticipation. His eyes flicked from the mugs to the folders, then to me. He said nothing, but sat down slowly. "Have a seat," I said, calm and clear. "We need to finish what we started." My mother entered a few minutes later, hair done, lipstick applied, as if brunch were about to be served. Her perfume arrived before she did. She didn't sit immediately, just glanced at me, then at the setup, and finally slid wordlessly into her chair. Matthew appeared last. Hair uncombed, sweatshirt wrinkled, eyes puffy, no acting. Just guilt. When all 3 were seated, I didn't ask for permission. I didn't ease into it. "There's something I didn't mention yesterday," I began, opening the folder in front of me and pushing it forward. $8,000, I said, taken from Grandma Helen's trust. The one that was supposed to be just for me. Transferred into your failed app company the same year she died. That wasn't just theft, that was desecration. I turned to Matthew. "She believed in me. You took that from her." His mouth parted slightly, but no sound came. He looked at the document in front of him like it had been written in another language. My father shifted in his seat, the leather creaking. "Look, it was family money. We've always—" "Forgery isn't family business," I cut in, my voice like ice. "Neither is siphoning inheritance through misappropriated trusts. This isn't personal, it's criminal." His jaw tightened. "Now watch your tone." "I'm speaking exactly like I would to a client who's about to face federal inquiry," I replied. "Consider that context." Matthew was now flipping through the pages, hands shaking slightly. "I thought it was Dad's," he mumbled. "You didn't ask," I said. "You let it happen because it benefited you." My mother, who'd remained silent until now, finally spoke, her voice low, pleading, practiced. "You'll tear us apart. Is that what you want?" Her eyes searched mine like she was looking for the boy I used to be, the one who would have folded at guilt and gone quiet. "No," I said. "You did that a long time ago. I'm just pulling back the curtain." The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was pressure, the inhale before the strike. The stillness of a house that wasn't done fighting. They had underestimated me for years. They had mistaken my restraint for weakness. But now, for the first time, they saw it for what it truly was. Control. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten, I just let the facts speak. And in that quiet, I watched something shift behind my father's eyes, not regret, but recalculation. He was already strategizing his next move. I stood up. "This is your chance to come clean. Make things right. The files are backed up. The lawyers have them. My name is no longer your collateral." I turned and walked out of the room, back toward the study, leaving the 3 of them in stunned, suffocating quiet. I thought I had seen the worst of their deceit. But their final move was the cruelest of all. I found the document just after sunrise, buried deep in the shared family folder we used to coordinate holidays. A scan of a mortgage contract, partially filled out, the digital signature block preloaded, with my name. My name. It was dated 2 months ago. The property listed, the family trust estate, the guarantor, me. No notification, no conversation, no consent. Just my name, set up to carry the weight of another one of their collapsing schemes. They hadn't just stolen from me, they were ready to bury me in the rubble. And that was the moment the last thread snapped. I didn't walk down the hallway. I marched, each step fueled by years of denial, gaslighting, and manipulation. When I threw open the study door, the 3 of them were already there, coffee in hand, talking low as if nothing had happened. Dad looked up, unbothered. "You should knock." I dropped the printed contract on the desk in front of him. "You wouldn't understand business," he muttered, eyes not even on the page yet. I leaned in, voice cutting through the air like glass. "Don't talk to me about business. I built mine. from scratch, without lies, without fraud. That caught him. His eyes moved to the page, then darted back to me. Matthew looked at the paper, confused. "What is that?" "That," I said, "is attempted identity fraud, using my name, my signature, to secure a mortgage against a trust you already emptied." Mother tried to soften the room, her voice slipping into that familiar, rehearsed concern. "I'm sure there's an explanation." "I'm done with explanations," I said. "We're past denial." I pulled out the folder, the same one I'd refined, updated, and encrypted the night before, neatly organized, time-stamped, beyond dispute. "I sent this to my legal team at 6:13 a.m., I continued, "and to the Oregon Department of Financial Regulation, and to the Federal Fraud Hotline." My father's jaw locked. He tried to gather himself, but I saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. Not emotional regret, just the threat of losing control. My mother finally reached for the contract, scanned it in silence. Matthew's face went pale. $8,000 from Helen's fund, I said, staring directly at him. "Transferred into your company. Tell me you didn't know." He blinked, swallowing. "I thought it came from Dad. He said it was a family loan." "She left that for me," I said. "Her only instruction in writing, to him alone. You stole from her, from me, and you didn't even ask." He stood up, hands trembling. "I didn't sign anything. I didn't—" His voice rose, cracking. "Why didn't you just say something before turning this into some legal vendetta?" "Because every time I spoke, you all turned away," I replied. "Every time I tried to stand up, you smiled like I was being dramatic, like I should be grateful to be ignored." The weight of it was suffocating. But not on me. On them. I didn't yell. I didn't waver. "You wanted to play business?" I asked, pulling out a final letter. "Fine, let's take it there." The letter was from my lawyer. I handed copies to each of them. Summons to a formal mediation. Third-party mediator. Legal record. "I'll see you in that room," I said, turning to leave. "You'll speak there. Not here. Not in whispers." 3 hours later, we sat in a conference room in a small office building off Burnside. Fluorescent lights buzzed above. My lawyer sat beside me, quiet but present. They filed in slowly, awkward in the sterile space. No warmth, no curated silverware, no legacy photos on the walls. Just facts. I laid it out. Methodical. Transfer dates. Account logs. Handwriting samples. Witnessed inconsistencies. Recorded calls. The paper trail told the whole story. And for once there was no way to deny it. My brother cracked first. He stood, voice raised, eyes wide. "This is insane." "You're going to destroy us." My lawyer raised a hand. "Please, keep your comments directed through counsel." He slumped back into the seat, breathing hard. My father, the man who had always controlled the room, stared blankly at the edge of the table. No comeback, no pivot. My mother's silence was louder than any outburst. The proud smile she wore like armor, gone. I finished with one sentence. "I'm done funding my own erasure. From here on, I stand on my own name, and you'll stand on your crimes." For a long time, no one moved. The mediator noted the statement. My lawyer confirmed the next steps. The process would unfold, slowly, painfully, legally. I stood and walked out without looking back. But even after exposing them, I had to face the hardest truth of all. Family wounds don't heal in court. That thought stayed with me, long after the signatures dried and the courtroom emptied. The legal work was done. The forensic audits had traced every dollar. My name was cleared, the inheritance restored, and their scheme exposed in full daylight. But walking out of the courthouse didn't feel like triumph. It felt like leaving a funeral. Back in my apartment, the silence felt heavier than before. There was no one to call. No one waiting with a bottle of wine or a hug or even a pat on the back. I had protected what was mine. But at what cost? The news had already spread. My brother's name was plastered across local business blogs, once labeled a tech visionary, now a cautionary tale. A fraud. At least 3 former clients of my father's firm were pursuing their own claims now. Lawsuits had been filed. Assets frozen. Every email, every signature, every whispered deal was being pulled apart by strangers in suits. As for my parents, they'd gone quiet. The once proud voices in neighborhood meetings, church gatherings, charity fundraisers, all muted. People talked, whispers in the grocery aisles, sideways glances in coffee shops. The fall from grace was sharp and public. But none of that gave me satisfaction. Justice, it turns out, is cold company. I stood by my kitchen window one evening, holding the legal letter confirming the final judgment. Full inheritance returned, all fraudulent contracts nullified. My lawyer's signature stamped in blue at the bottom. Legally, I'd won. Emotionally, I wasn't so sure. Holidays were coming. The first Thanksgiving I wouldn't spend in that house. No overcooked turkey, no forced laughter, no mother humming while she stirred the gravy, no dad carving in silence while pretending the world revolved around him. And yet, I didn't miss them. I missed the idea of them. The illusion I had spent years convincing myself was real. That illusion was dead now. One night, I pulled out an old photo album, the one Grandma Helen gave me before she passed. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside, tucked between faded pictures of her garden and handwritten recipes, was a letter. She'd written it the summer before she died. I had forgotten it even existed. In it, she wrote, "You'll find the world doesn't always play fair, but fairness isn't what makes a man. Integrity does. Keep your own name clean, even when others try to write their stories over yours." I closed the album, hands trembling. I didn't cry. Not exactly, but something in me loosened. That next morning, I walked down to the courthouse to pick up the final set of papers myself. No assistant, no legal clerk, just me. It felt important, not for ceremony, but for closure. On my way back, I stopped at the river. The Willamette was quiet that morning, barely rippling. A soft mist clung to the trees lining the bank. I found an empty bench, the kind I used to sit on with her as a kid, when she'd sneak me peppermint candies and talk about birds. I held the legal file on my lap, unopened, and for the first time in months, I just breathed. I thought about my mother's smile, that moment from chapter 1 that used to haunt me, the pride, the distance, the perfect mask. I used to chase that smile, thinking it meant love. But now, I saw it differently. It wasn't pride, it was blindness. She never saw me. Not really, but I did. I saw the boy who worked his way through college, who paid off his loans without help. I saw the man who built a business from nothing, who kept showing up even when no one clapped. I saw someone who refused to stay quiet, even when silence was safer. That, I realized, was the real inheritance. I stood up, looked out across the water and whispered, "Some wounds you don't close. You just stop bleeding from them. And sometimes, the family you lose saves the person you are." The air felt lighter. I didn't look back at the courthouse behind me. I didn't need to. That chapter was over. The ache remained. It always would, I suppose. No ruling could rewind time, erase those birthdays where I sat alone, wondering what I'd done wrong. No check could fill the silence of a childhood spent proving I was worthy. But still, I walked away intact. And more than that, I walked away defined not by what was taken from me, but by what I refused to surrender. I proved them wrong, not with revenge, not with money, but by refusing to let their lies define my worth.